staying safe and healthy amid the ongoing quarantine lockdown as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. And, throughout this entire lockdown, we've had quite a few different things pop up with regards to the delicate balance between government overreach and government protecting us in order to try to keep us safe, if you want to say, and to try to help mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. Because unfortunately, we have to admit that there are people out there that aren't going to abide by common sense measures and partake in the necessary procedures to help mitigate the spread. So there is a very fine line that we're treading right now, if you want to say, between where it's well-intentioned by the government to try to protect us, as opposed to government actually infringing on our rights. And there's a lot to be taken into consideration. Once this pandemic subsides, are these newly implemented government regulations and restrictions going to be kept in place? Or will they also subside once we try and get back to some sense of normalcy and a normal way of life? So one of the biggest things that took place this past weekend was the shutting down of church services. And this has been a rather contentious topic because obviously we have the right in this country to assemble, as well as the right to freedom of speech or freedom of religion. And where do you draw the line between the government infringing upon that right to gather and exercise your freedom of religion and being shut down? So it says, according to The Hill here, why the government can shut down church gatherings during pandemics. Of course, they right off the bat, they have to quote, Jesus bore it so that you would not have to. They like to pick and choose portions of the scripture and the Bible that they want to reference. And, Pelosi's best at this because she does it to get her point across, picking and choosing portions of the Bible while defending killing babies. But that's another discussion for another time. So it says that if the recent declaration by the Awakened Church of Jonesboro, Arkansas is true, Jesus might also be viewed as the first coronavirus offender because the Last Supper hosted 3 disciples, too many under the social gathering limits in most states during the crisis. At the time, of course, Roman Governor Pontius Pilate was trying to contain Christianity itself, which now some church leaders accuse American governors of doing. Some churches plan to defy state public health directives by carrying out large Easter services. And again, this is obviously we need to avoid getting into too big of gatherings right now because that is obviously how this virus spreads. But there are alternative methods to still exercising your freedom of religion and the right to gather. You can gather at a safe distance. You could gather in parks. Well, at least some places you can. In New Jersey, you can't because they shut all the parks down. But you can gather in most open places at a safe distance, and you should be just fine. But even that is coming under fire, which we'll get to. It says the issue is playing out in several states. In Kansas, Democratic Governor Laura Kelly has barred religious gatherings with more than 10 people. That action prompted the Republican-controlled state legislature to then vote to rescind the order as an attack on the free exercise of religion, which is exactly what we were speaking about. Kelly asked her staff to explore all her legal options. Under the Constitution, she is on strong grounds to issue such an order. While untested, the free exercise clause is not a license for religious spreaders in a pandemic. So this is where the fine line is. Do we have the right to have a free exercise of religion, or does government have the right to step in and say we can't do that? This may be the most compelling use of the belief that the Constitution, quote, is not a suicide pact. I've been critical of that often repeated reference by those who want to ignore fundamental rights. It was originally attributed to Abraham Lincoln, attributed to Abraham Lincoln after he had violated the Constitution by unilaterally suspending habeas corpus. It is more often attributed to Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson, without noting that he used the line in one of the most reprehensible opinions, a dissent to the Supreme Court, extending protections to a priest arrested for his controversial speech. These churches would convert the free exercise clause into a suicide pact of sorts. I can't help but feel that that's just a tad bit extreme, saying it's a suicide pact when there's measures that can be taken to mitigate the risk and still move forward with the church services. It says the interpretation not only puts the faithful at risk of infection, but also their communities. No constitutional rights are truly absolute. Here we go. This is where we often hear about the Constitution's up for interpretation. It was written 200 some odd years ago, and it doesn't necessarily mean the same as it means now. And this is where they like to try to twist and turn things. Rights such as free exercise of religion and free speech can be overcome with a sufficiently compelling purpose of state and the least restrictive means of achieving that purpose. There is nothing more compelling than battling a pandemic, and limiting gathering size is the only effective deterrent to the coronavirus spreading until a vaccine can be made available. So it goes on to say, the real issue here may be more about state law. Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt declared that Kansas statute and the Kansas Constitution Bill of Rights each forbid the governor from criminalizing participation in worship gatherings by executive order. And that's another aspect of this that comes into play is each state has their own constitution. So where does state constitution trump the federal constitution, and where is that delicate balance and how this should be addressed? Kansas law goes beyond the First Amendment in its protections. However, even the Kansas Preservation of Religious Freedom Act allows for denial of forms of free exercise when based on a compelling state interest and least intrusive means. Schmidt notes that the orders do not stop grocery shopping and other gatherings, but religious services can be supplied online, while grocery shopping for most people continues to take actual visits to the stores. So this is it again. It's a fine line that we're treading right now, because obviously nobody wants other people to get sick. Nobody wants to see anybody get sick, and nobody wants to see anyone die, despite the fact that so many out there like to run around and condemn anyone who dares to question what's going on right now amidst this pandemic, and who dares to question what seems to be like an overreach of government in many ways. The Constitution does not leave the states as mere bystanders for us to watch as pastors, such as Tony Spell, bus in hundreds of people for church services. So, that's a little, again, that could be a little extreme. Blatantly busing in people for church services could be a bit of a stretch. Such services are worse than a suicide pact. They're a pact to serve potential spreaders. Spell may declare that, quote, true Christians do not mind dying, but their neighbors might mind a great deal. So that's a little bit of insight into what's going on right now as far as the idea between banning religious services and then trying to go to the other extreme and busing in people in a blatant disregard for people's health. So you go on to the other extreme here. Mississippi City's coronavirus shutdown bans drive-in church services ahead of Easter. So this was a very ingenious method to still carry out the church services through a drive-in method, which most people, regardless of political affiliation or how you feel about the coronavirus or what the government's doing, this is a common sense way to let people still exercise their religious freedom and do it from a safe distance inside their cars. So here's a video that was recorded in this church service where the cops swarmed the service and tried to break up the drive-in Easter service.
If switching to Visible means you'll miss the mystery in your phone bill, we're sure there's a true crime series you can catch up on. Ditch the mystery. Visible, welcome to the future of phone service.
Well, this weekend is Easter, but for the first time in America's history, the country's Christians will not be able to celebrate it with one another, even if they want to. Most governments in this country will not allow them to gather in churches. Mississippi is under lockdown. All non-essential businesses are closed. That means the liquor stores, of course, are still open. They're essential. Churches are not essential, according to the state. King James Bible Baptist Church has been trying to hold drive-in services. That means parishioners remain in their cars during it, but cops showed up anyway and raided it.
This is King James Bible Baptist Church, where Pastor Hamilton, where I'm the pastor of the church at. I'm a good citizen. Ain't breaking no law, ain't selling no drugs.
And notice here how,
Word of God. And look at all these police cars here.
These cops swarmed the church service, and I don't see many of these cops in protective gear. They're definitely not abiding by the social distancing guidelines. So there's an awful lot going on here.
That was Pastor James Hamilton you heard on the tape. We're happy to have him on with us tonight, along with Kelly Shackelford, president of the First Liberty Institute. Thanks so much for coming on, both of you. First to you, Pastor, what exactly were you doing wrong?
We wasn't doing anything wrong. We was abiding by the CDC guidelines that the city of Greenville had put in place, also the state of Mississippi. Our members of the church was inside of their cars, had their windows up, and I was preaching the word of God. So no one was outside, and also we had cars at a distance. And so legally, we wasn't doing anything wrong. We was going by the CDC guidelines. And so I don't understand why the police officer would come to our church and try to break it up.
Well, it's totally outrageous. Kelly Shackelford, I assume that when this happened, every civil rights group in America jumped to the pastor's defense, right?
I don't know about that. We certainly did. The order that's in Greenville is just massively unconstitutional. It targets churches in a way that it targets no other group. So cars in parking lots are fine. It's only a crime if the cars in the parking lot are at the church parking lot. And I mean, look at last night. You had probably 6, 7 or so cars there for the church, and yet they were surrounded by police. And I don't know if you saw the video, Tucker, but one of the police officers came up to Pastor Hamilton and said that because of these orders, because of that local order in Greenville, Mississippi, that his rights were suspended. Those are the specific words he used. Like, your constitutional rights are gone now. Well, I don't know what country he thinks he's living in, but your rights aren't suspended. And I would just tell any church that has any of these issues or whatever, we have a lot of this information. Go to firstliberty.org, just spell out First Liberty. It'll tell you that you do have rights, that we want to follow the CDC guidelines. We don't want people to be injured in any way, and that's what this church did.
Course.
That doesn't give people the right to discriminate against churches and treat them in this kind of way.
Well, of course it doesn't. So, Pastor, I mean, I'm not against liquor stores, but liquor stores don't answer the question, what happens when you die, which is something maybe would be nice to know now that people are dying from this pandemic. How do you feel that liquor stores get to continue, but you can't celebrate Easter in church?
I think of it like this. I believe that liquor, beer have killed more people than the coronavirus ever would. And so it's a sad case in America. Whoever ever thought that we would have a government in Greenville that would pass such a law that will allow the liquor stores to have curbside service, but would come to the church and try to disrupt a church service. I would have never dreamed in 1,000 years that America, the home of the brave and the land of the free, will ever pass such law that would consider a liquor store essential, but a church non-essential. I am shocked.
And then another aspect of this that a lot of people are failing to take into consideration is the fact that not only are liquor stores open, which I'm kind of indifferent about because it's a store and we can, it's not necessarily essential, but that's neither here nor there right now. But we also have abortion clinics that are open. So people can't even gather for a religious service in the safety of their own cars in a parking lot of a church, but we have abortion clinics that are open for business. So that's another thing that we need to take into consideration here.
So 87,000 Americans died of alcohol last year. This epidemic is projected to kill 60,000. So you're absolutely right. Technically, factually, you're right. I just want to go out on this. I would like to know, and if you know the name, I hope you'll say it on the air, who made this decision to let liquor stores get a pass but hassle your church with armed police officers? What politician decided that was a good idea, Pastor?
Eric Simmons. He's a mayor. He's a supporter of Joe Biden. He made a decision that because most of the virus was linked to, he said, to the churches. So that's why he came down very hard on the churches to not have drive-in service. I can tell you, when 20 plus cars came to our church, we felt, not just me, we felt intimidated. We felt frightened. And I heard about this in China. I heard this about in communist country, but I never thought that I would feel so afraid and my people would feel so frightened and intimidated by police officers.
So you hear about civil rights violations. This is an actual civil rights violation. Pastor, thanks so much for coming on. Kelly Shackelford, appreciate your coming too. Thank you.
Okay, and then this crosses a line. And again, I keep talking about how we have a delicate balance between, whether or not we should let people gather in large groups and whether or not we should be able to continue on with our church services. And this is a blatant disregard for people's rights. So, and then you have the actual video. Oh, here's another article that I addressed this article a few weeks ago, and this is just talking about the extremes that the mayor of New York City was willing to go to prevent religious services from taking place. And he was actually talking about not only shutting down religious services, but he was actually speaking to permanently taking away their ability to operate once the pandemic subsides. So that's just a whole nother level of government overreach. And then finally, this is the actual video that was posted to Twitter that took place during this confrontation between these churchgoers who were trying to partake of the service in their cars and when the police arrived.
Look at this, y'all. All these they heard through the grapevine we're having service at 6:30, and there's more police cars at a church service. Yes, this is King James Bible Baptist Church, where Pastor Hamilton, where I'm the pastor of the church at. I'm a good citizen. Ain't breaking no law, ain't selling no drugs. I'm just preaching the word of God. And look at all these police cars here. I mean, our service don't start till 6:30. This is America, private property of a church. Look at this, y'all. It's more police pulling up. They ain't done. Yes, sir. I got a letter from my lawyer too. You want to read my letter from my lawyer? Okay, I'm good. I got that. I know about it.
Notice how the police officer says, "I don't care about your lawyer." So it's obvious they're not really worried about their rights right now. And this needs to get shared out, because anytime you talk about, some of the restrictions being forced by government right now amidst this coronavirus pandemic, you're automatically told that you don't care about anybody and you're not worried about the people that are sick. But you have to understand that we still have rights in this country, despite the fact that we are dealing with a pandemic, and we still have the ability to exercise our rights, albeit in a modified fashion right now, to protect each other. But we still have the right to exercise the constitutional rights we have.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So if there is a driving,
We're gonna get tickets.
we'll issue citations.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
I'd like to give you a formal warning.
Yes, sir.
And we'll allow if you do have members come, we will allow them to leave before they're cited.
Yes, sir.
If they decide not to, is when they will be dismissed.
Yes, sir. Hey, I love authority.
When you get an order from the government,
Yeah.
your rights are suspended.
No, the government Our right don't come from authority. It comes from the Bible. So the authority does not have the right over the Constitution. We're talking about the Constitutional law, the First, Second Amendment, the U.S. Constitution that was given to us by our forefather. Tate Reed can't give it.
And that should stoke fear into every single red-blooded American citizen right there. The fact that a cop was walking up and saying that your rights are suspended. Think about that.
Take it away. Mayor Eric Simmons can't take it away, nor the police officer.
It can be suspended.
It can't.
Not a military, that's a military law.
No, it can't. Hey, look at this, y'all. I'm a good citizen here. I don't sell drugs. Look at the police. Unless I'm as a pastor, I got police officers here, y'all, like I'm committing, like I'm robbing or I kill somebody. This what they don't have this when a murderer's in Greenville, y'all.
We need to keep that in mind right now as the coronavirus pandemic seems to be subsiding little by little. It is absolutely imperative that we understand our rights. And as this pandemic does subside, because it will, God willing, it will, we need to ensure that government overreach subsides alongside it. So keep that in mind, guys. Appreciate all you guys tuning in, and I will talk to you guys.